Welcome to the Bari Chronicles podcast. I'm Tash.
And I'm Damo.
And you can catch us on Mondays on your favourite streaming platform.
Many people get, sort of scared of, meeting a surgeon, of the whole process, and we're there to work together and, see people's lives hopefully improved.
Absolutely. No, I agree 100%. In fact, we just got an email, that's why I'm running a little bit late to the Zoom with you. Just an email from a patient who's lost 50% of his total weight. And he sent a photo in and he's so appreciative. He had his sleep 18 months ago and it's just absolutely changed his life. And he was a man headed for an early death, the way he was going at 180 kilograms. He's now down to 90, and he just had all that weight in the center of his abdomen. We call that central adiposity, and that is another name for that is a walking heart attack. And this is what happens. You see, this is a sort of person who's in their 50s, who's walking along a beach one day and then just has a major heart attack and he can't be revived, and that's the end of his story. And that's the future that he was facing, absolutely. And now he's got the opportunity to have a different future. And having got his weight down to 90 kilograms, he's used the sleeve as a tool. He's done the hard work. We just put the tool in and given him some guidance and support around it. But he's done the hard work. So all credit to him. He can legitimately own his success and have a healthy and full life as a result of achieving that. So it's very gratifying to see that. And that's why we do what we do.
Yeah, I love that. I think we're seeing more men actually stick their hand up and go, yeah, I need to do something about my health, which I'm loving, because, it was always sort of, oh, you're a guy, you should just tough it out, go to the gym, stop making excuses. And it's not really like that, is it?
It definitely has changed. You're spot on. So when I started doing this sort of work nearly 20 years ago, it was almost all female patients coming forward. It would be 90% to 10%. Now it's not quite 50-50, but it's getting there. It's about 60%, 40% male. And I think that's as we've really understood that this is not about cosmetics. This is about health, and the prevalence of obesity is just as high in men, and therefore there's no reason why men shouldn't be afforded the treatment for their obesity. As we started to also better understand the underlying genetics of obesity and the biology of obesity, and realise that this is a genuine medical condition that should be treated like any other genuine medical condition, and it shouldn't discriminate for male or female sex or any other discriminatory way. It should just be treated as we would any condition. So that's nice to see the men coming forward, and certainly the men tend to have a slightly higher risk with same weight for weight because of the nature of where their obesity is carried. It's often in the abdomen. That's that condition we call central adiposity, and independently that's a risk factor for cardiovascular disease and diabetes. So men certainly have a lot to benefit from having weight management.
Yeah, and we don't really need to lose, it's great when we see the numbers going down and the huge weight loss, but we don't really need a massive weight loss to make a big difference, do we?
We don't, exactly right. So the studies will show that if you can lose the first third of the extra weight you're carrying, the majority of your medical health will be improved by that loss of just the first third. So that means you can still be overweight and healthy. And in fact, our treatment goal is not to lose all of the excess weight that every patient that comes into our office is carrying. That's unrealistic for a start when you understand the underlying genetics and biology of obesity as a driver in the background for the higher weight. So we're not looking to eradicate every last kilogram of extra weight being carried. What we're trying to do is get patients to get enough weight off to give them a shot at a healthy, happy life. And for most patients, that will be complete by losing around 2/3 the extra weight they're carrying. But most of your improvements in the first third, That's the point where we see patients are halfway along their weight loss journey and they've already gone into diabetic remission, or they've already got on their come off their blood pressure medication, or they're no longer needing their CPAP machine for their sleep apnea. And we see that early on. So it's a gratifying thing to see those early runs on the board in the beginning of the weight loss journey after weight loss surgery. But we want to reinforce that. So we're not happy just with 1/3. We want to double that. We want to get the average patient to lose at least 2/3 of their excess weight. And I say to patients, look, if you lose more than that, that's fantastic, but that last third's for you. That's just for you to feel a bit more comfortable about what the scales read and the way you look in the mirror, but there's no extra health benefit in that last third. But we'll try and get it off for you if you want it off for you, but the health aspects are sorted out with the first 2/3 of excess weight loss.
Wow. Because I had sleeve and nearly 12 years ago, and I lost the biggest loss that I had lost about 112 kilos. But I sort of learned fairly quickly that I'd lost a lot of muscle in that. And it took years. And I still don't think I've I haven't regained all the strength that I lost with all that. But, at the start, I thought, I'm 5 months post-op, I've lost 60 kilos, this is amazing. And then, but there were a few other health complications that came up because of that. I think for me, it sort of might have come off a little bit too fast.
Well, you touched on a really important point, Damien, and that is that not all weight loss is good weight loss. And it's a point that we really try and get across. It's not just a myth and a misconception there in the general community, but it's also poorly understood in the medical and even the bariatric surgical community. We don't want weight loss for weight loss sake. What we want to remove fat. We want to have fat loss, not weight loss. So we talk about our body as being composed of essentially two things, fat and fat-free mass. And that fat-free mass is things like muscle, it's like bone density, it is body fluid. All that's the good stuff. We want that. We want to preserve the fat-free mass. We just want to target the excess fat tissue. And so one of the things that's a bit of a indirect marker for whether we're achieving that or not is to see what the overall weight of the patient's doing. So when we say, okay, you've lost 60 kilograms, we then can say, well, look, the hope is that the majority of that 60 kilograms, if not all of it, is been a loss of fat. But that's just a bit of a pie in the sky guess. We need to put a bit more science to it. So that's why things like body composition studies can be really useful as adjuncts to understand how we're going with getting rid of the fat, but preserving the fat-free mass like your muscle. So body composition studies are very helpful. The other things that can be helpful are measurements of skin fat and waist circumference. So these allow us to sort of fine-tune what otherwise can be a very, very crude measure of success if we just look at what the scales say. One of the other things that is important to targeting the fat and preserving the muscle is to have the quality multidisciplinary aftercare before and after your procedure, because we do need that regular input from qualified dietitian nutritionists so that we can help ensure that we're having adequate protein intake, multivitamin intake, fluid and fiber intake, and not just having a smaller amount of a poor quality, low nutritional value diet. We need to improve the nutrition. We also need to be guided around regular exercise and resistance training to preserve and build that muscle and that bone density and not let that be lost. So it's a whole change and a whole supervision around that change by experienced health professionals that is required to ensure that we get the right outcomes here and move away from this idea that any weight loss is good weight loss.
Well, so we can sort of really do ourselves a disservice if we don't have that team approach.
Definitely. And it's one of the challenges I think we've all come to accept that as the standard of care for bariatric surgery now. Everyone in the world would say that bariatric surgery should only be conducted within the context of a genuine long-term multidisciplinary program. everyone would accept that as the standard of care. And any surgeons that would provide bariatric surgery without that aftercare are outliers. They're away from the standard expected of their peers. Now, where we're having a challenge now is with the rise of the GLP-1 medications like Ozempic and Wegovy and Mounjaro, where patients are being given those medications as a prescription with absolutely no aftercare, no guidance, no input from dietitians, no input from exercise physiologists, no input from psychologists, absolutely nothing. And there's a concern that they are now losing a lot of their muscle bulk as a result of that, and getting conditions like sarcopenia. So we've got to be very, very careful now with this wave of obesity treatment, that we don't drop the ball and lose sight of the importance of that holistic, ongoing multidisciplinary care.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few people that I've spoken to recently, and they had some great success with Mounjaro. But once they stopped taking it, the weight started coming back on, and and I was just like, wow. So if you don't have that multidisciplinary care around you, it could be doing some more harm than good.
Well, definitely the short-term nature of it is an important thing, and I think that's not well understood. If you stop the Wegovy or you stop the Mounjaro, the appetite returns immediately, and then the weight returns soon after. And that speaks to the idea of obesity being a chronic medical condition, lifelong, that is genetically based, that's biologically expressed. There is an imbalance in the way that person's body regulates energy and metabolism, that wants their body to be at a certain elevated set point. That set point might be 130 kilograms might be what their genes think is normal. So as a result, that genetic expression will influence the person's physiology and biology such that they maintain a weight of 130 kilograms. And that will be maintained through having an elevated appetite, for instance, or the need to have big meals to feel full, or a searching for high calorie density foods to more efficiently bring in those calories to keep that weight of 130 kilograms like the genes want. But whatever the way it's expressed, the underlying genetics are always going to be there for the entire person's life. Therefore, the treatment's got to be there for the entire person's life. And if you just have a 6-month treatment of Mounjaro and then stop, or Wegovy and then stop, or Ozempic and then stop, will have the underlying weight issue very quickly resurface, because that's not a 6-month issue. That's a lifetime issue, and it needs to be matched with a lifetime of treatment.
Wow. I know when I had my surgery, I saw my surgeon about 2 years after, and we both sort of at the time, and we all know so much better now, but we thought at the time, like 2 years, that's a long time to sort of maintain that contact. But I'm seeing more surgeons and their team sort of go, no, this needs to be a lifelong journey. Sure, you might not be seeing your team every single month, but there needs to be that, or it seems to me that there needs to be that contact there to maintain, the success, I suppose, or the efficacy of what we've done.
I think that's exactly right. And again, reinforcing this idea, this is a lifetime of management to match a lifelong condition. However, when we talk about aftercare, we talk about aftercare after a weight loss procedure as having 2 primary objectives. The first is to educate and show a patient how to best utilize the new tool that they have. The tool will suppress their appetite. It'll allow them to feel full with a much smaller portion. It'll stimulate their metabolism. But we need to show patients how to best utilize that tool. And that's where a period of intensive communication and support by a multidisciplinary team is important. But that period is probably mostly in the first 2 years. I think after 2 years of regular contact with your patient, with regular input from the dietitians, from the psychologists, from the bariatric physicians, and from your surgeons, at the end of that period, most patients who have participated fully in that program really know what they should do and what they shouldn't do and how to get the best out of their tool. So the frequency of that contact can then start to become less frequent, maybe once a year touch base. The second reason for the aftercare is so we can troubleshoot any issues that might arise from surgery. So sometimes people get reflux. Sometimes people get some swallowing issues. Sometimes people get some changes in their bowel habit. Sometimes other side effects might pop up that need a specialist to be able to manage effectively. So that is lifelong. So therefore, you do need to have a contact or ability to ring up your surgeon, your clinic at any time down the track, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and say, hey, just touching base, I've noticed this, or I've got that problem emerge, or I've seen another doctor and they've referred me back because they feel like as though it might relate to my previous weight loss surgery. Can you help? And we have an obligation and a duty and a responsibility to be available to help our patients at any time down the track from their weight loss journey.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I think because something that Tash and I have spoken about a fair bit is frustration that people can get with their team, I guess, with their dietitian even. So often we go into it wanting a meal by meal plan for the rest of our lives. And do you think that sort of goes back to the old diet culture? And, because I know for me, I had no idea really what a healthy meal consisted of. And it wasn't until learning these tools from the dietitians that I was able to go, okay, I can put together a plate of food based on my knowledge that is going to be good for me, rather than needing to follow a step-by-step recipe.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's exactly right. We do need to move away from the rigid adherence to sort of a magic diet or a magic dietary instruction book that you need to do this, as you said, meal by meal by meal. We need to move away from that and more focus on the general principles of healthy nutrition and what a diet that will be conducive to maintaining a healthy weight looks like. So in that to that point, rather than instructing a patient that you need to have this particular meal for breakfast, we say we need to have a meal of approximately this size for breakfast, and within that meal there should be some protein. And the different types of ways we can get protein into that with eggs or with yogurt, or have a little bit of an idea of where good protein sources are and what the roundabout percentage protein value of those meals are, and the approximate calorie value of those meals are, so that patients can then have flexibility and they can have confidence, having been armed with that education, to be able to go and make appropriate choices without having to adhere to a rigid instruction manual.
Yeah, I love that.
And we want them to have, so the whole idea, if we circle back, why are we doing what we're doing? We're doing it because we want people to have a shot at their best life. We want a normal life. And it's not normal to be adherent to a specific dietary plan, meal by meal, for the rest of your life. That's not a normal way of living, and that's not a high quality way of living. And it's not a living that's really possible to do in a lot of times. People are very busy with work. They might have to eat on the run. They might travel a lot. And so rigid adherence to a specific set of dietary instructions is not always possible. And that can actually lead to then patients giving up and throwing it all out. Rather than having an idea of an educated set of principles around proper nutrition and proper calorie intake, macro and micronutrients, what's important, how do we get those in, is what's going to set you up with the tools for life to be able to have successful long-term weight management.
Yeah. I mean, that was something that I had never even heard of, was macros, until was really only a few years ago. And I was like, what is this, magic we're speaking about? And it was we had some people that were around us that were right into bodybuilding and all that sort of stuff, and they had started explaining, what a macro was, and I was like, wow, that makes so much sense, because for me in the diet culture, if I had a day where everything just sort of flew out the window and I ended up having a takeaway of some sort, then to me, I'd wrecked the entire diet, threw it out, and was back to eating whatever, whenever, however, and regained all the weight that I'd lost and just felt terrible about myself. And suddenly it was like, okay, so just because I, had a takeaway, it doesn't mean that my life is ruined. It doesn't mean that I've wrecked my sleeve. It doesn't mean anything. It just means I ate a meal and I can go back to, getting the right nutrients in the next meal.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And this whole idea of if we stray once off this rigid meal plan, then that we throw the baby out with the bathwater and we just throw everything away, that lurching from one extreme to the other is a feature of diets that we might have had in the past. And another reason why we want to drop that mentality. We don't go back to that way of life. We want to have the big picture. And that big picture is over a period of weeks, not one meal. And so you're right. If we do have a meal that's not the most consistent with our goals of good nutrition and good weight management, that's okay. We put that in perspective and we say, right, but overall for the week that I'm in, I want to make sure that I get the right balance of my macronutrients, the right balance of my micronutrients, the right amount of fluid and fiber into my diet, the right amount of exercise into my diet. And when seen in that totality, one isolated meal where you might have had a bit of fish and chips or a bit of fast food or takeaway or a piece of chocolate is put into perspective, because you're not going to gain 60 kilograms with one piece of chocolate. We gain 60 kilograms when our overall diet over a series of months and years is poor in quality and excessive in calorie intake. So it's refunneling our patients to think the big picture and to understand the values that they're looking for, and to help manage control short-term urges, and to get away from the all or nothing. Either I'm completely compliant with a diet, or I've broken it, I'm a failure, it's all not working, I'm throwing it out, and I may as well give up. That kind of that old mentality that sometimes plagues many patients before they come forward for weight loss management is something we want to leave in the past, make a complete break from, and then move forward in a much more balanced way of thinking and a much more balanced way of living.
So do you think this is where it's important to have, like a psychologist on board? Because, that can be a real mental game. When we're trying to, we're not just changing the way we eat, we're changing the way we think about eating.
Exactly right. We're changing the way we think about eating. That's exactly right. And with a psychologist, I qualify my answer by saying that most psychologists, most mental health professionals are not very specialized or experienced in changing the way we think about food. So therefore, I wouldn't want to give the impression that we can prescribe a psychologist and tick a box that, right, we've sent you to see a psychologist, that box has been ticked, that's now been sorted out. Because you can see the wrong health professional every day of the week for years on end, and it makes absolutely no change. We need to have the right people. And so we, for instance, in our practice, we use a company called Fresh Start with Amber and Alex, who have made it their life's work to coach people into being in touch with their longer term values and put their short term urges into perspective and keep them focused on what the big picture is. and not let them get derailed by a moment or an issue or something that might have happened in their day life that then has caused a trigger for either emotional comfort eating or relapsing into poor behaviors or an abandonment of the entire journey. All that sort of stuff is around coaching. It's around support. So we all need that. We all need that coaching and support, but we just need to get it from the right people with the right passion, the right understanding, and the right background education to deliver that, rather than saying everyone should go and see a psychologist.
Yeah.
But there are some patients for whom a regular psychologist will be helpful. And they're patients that, for instance, may battle some significant mental health issues that are getting in the way of them being able to focus on weight management. So managing those mental health issues, whether it's depression or whether it's anxiety, whether it's social phobia, whatever that is, but managing those in a traditional way with a qualified psychologist can help support the patient's success in their weight management journey. So I would encourage that, and particularly if there's an element of the patient's weight issue that relates to a past psychological trauma. We have a number of our female patients who have unfortunately had past sexual abuse, been victims of sexual abuse or victims of domestic violence or other trauma, and that needs to be worked through properly with a qualified psychologist so that the damage done by that trauma doesn't carry through for the patient's entire life and derail and sabotage their success with things that are now important for them, like getting a healthy weight.
Yeah. Wow. I really like that because, yeah, there have been times where I know I needed to see a psychologist for different things. But there were also times where just having a chat to someone who had been there, done, and had great success, whilst I didn't necessarily follow, everything that they did, it was talking through that and going, okay, well, maybe here's a few areas that I can adjust, tweak a little bit, and, continue feeling good about myself.
I agree, and that's in that one of the formats that can be really helpful with that is small group support groups. So we run those, for instance, in our program every month for the first 2 years after surgery, and those are a very conclusive, non-judgmental way of feeling a sense of shared identity and shared experience with other people that have had weight issues and now are on a weight loss journey, to be able to exchange ideas in a moderated way with a health professional, a mental health professional who can structure the talk for a particular topic. So as an example, we might have an evening around comfort eating, and everyone comfort eats. But sometimes we comfort eat to an excessive level that it starts to really impact upon our ability to manage our weight effectively. But there'll be various triggers that lead to someone to comfort eating. It might be boredom. It might be late night snacking by being at home with nothing to do and the availability of the food in the fridge and the pantry. It might be a coping strategy for stress or depression or anxiety or being tired, So there's a lot of reasons why we comfort eat, and everyone will have their own story. And these support groups do provide an opportunity for people to share their story if they want to, or just listen if they don't, but then derive some solutions for and strategies for managing that to put that comforting in its place so that we can then move forward in a more successful way and get the best out of our surgery and not be held back by some of those issues not being addressed properly.